It's hard to believe that nearly a decade has passed since it all happened, but even now, whenever I think back to that particular day, I can't help but feel a small, secret thrill of satisfaction. The memory of what I did, my own little act of petty revenge, which I never even set out to plan, still brings a sly smile to my face. It wasn't something I orchestrated in advance or spent weeks plotting, it just unfolded naturally, almost by accident. Yet, despite all the time that's gone by, the feeling of quiet triumph I experienced in that moment has never really faded. When I was 19, I had already spent 4 long years living with my ex, let's call him Daniel. On the surface, Daniel was charming and charismatic, the kind of person who could win anyone over with a smile. But beneath that pleasant exterior, he was deeply controlling, and his true nature only revealed itself gradually. In the beginning, the red flags were easy to dismiss. He'd make offhand comments like, "Why are you dressing up so much for class? Are you trying to impress someone?" At first, I laughed it off, thinking he was just being silly or maybe even a little insecure. But those comments soon became more frequent and more pointed. Whenever I made plans to go out with friends, my phone would start buzzing nonstop. Daniel would send a barrage of WhatsApp messages, demanding to know exactly who I was with, what we were doing, and why I wasn't responding to him immediately. If I replied right away, he'd accuse me of not paying enough attention to him or claim that my answers were too vague. If I took even 5 minutes to respond, he'd insist I was ignoring him on purpose, or that I must be hiding something. It felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells, always trying to anticipate what might set him off next. Gradually, Daniel managed to cut me off from almost everyone I cared about. Whenever my friends invited me to hang out or suggested we do something together, he would immediately start sulking or pick a fight over something trivial. Sometimes he'd accuse me of not caring about him, or he'd insist that my friends didn't really like me and were just using me. The arguments would drag on until I was emotionally exhausted and ended up canceling my plans, just to keep the peace. But his controlling behavior didn't end with just isolating me from my friends. Daniel became obsessed with monitoring every aspect of my personal life, especially my digital communications. Almost daily, he would insist that I hand over my phone so he could inspect it. He would sit there, scrolling meticulously through all my text messages, checking my call history, and combing through my social media accounts, Facebook, Instagram, even old emails, looking for anything that might suggest I was being unfaithful or keeping secrets from him. It didn't matter how innocent the messages were. A simple text from a classmate about a group project, or a cheerful message from my cousin, would immediately raise his suspicions. He would bombard me with questions. Who is this? Why are they texting you? What did you mean by this emoji? Sometimes, he would even demand that I explain every single conversation, no matter how trivial. No matter how much I tried to reassure him, or how transparent I was, it was never enough. He was always convinced that I was hiding something from him, and he would twist even the most harmless interactions into evidence of betrayal. The constant interrogations left me feeling anxious and on edge, as if I was always one step away from being accused of something I hadn't done. Daniel's need for control extended into every corner of my life, even the moments when I simply wanted a little space for myself. If I ever mentioned that I needed some quiet time alone, to relax, to think, or just to recharge, he would immediately turn it against me. He'd accuse me of being cold or distant, insisting that if I truly loved him, I would want to spend every possible moment together. He'd say things like, "Why do you need to be alone? Am I not enough for you? Or you're so selfish, always putting yourself first." These accusations made me feel guilty for even wanting a few minutes of solitude. It was the same whenever I tried to connect with my family. If I spent time on the phone with my mom or siblings, Daniel would sulk or complain that I was choosing them over him. He'd make snide remarks about how I cared more about my family than about our relationship, or he'd interrupt my calls with dramatic sighs and exaggerated gestures, making it impossible to have a normal conversation. Even the most ordinary activities, like reading a book, listening to music, or just sitting quietly, could spark an argument. If I chose to read instead of watching TV with him, he'd accuse me of ignoring him or not valuing our time together. Although Daniel never left any physical marks, the emotional toll was relentless. He was a master at twisting my words, taking something I said and turning it into evidence that I was a bad partner. He'd make me question my own memories, insisting that things hadn't happened the way I remembered, or that I was overreacting or being too sensitive. Over time, I started to doubt myself and my own judgment. The gaslighting, the guilt-tripping, and the constant emotional pressure wore me down until I genuinely believed that I was the problem, that everything wrong in our relationship was somehow my fault, and that if I just tried harder, things would get better. One day, after yet another exhausting and bitter argument, things reached a breaking point. That evening, Daniel launched into one of his familiar tirades, accusing me, yet again, of not loving him enough, of never doing enough to prove my devotion. His words were sharp and relentless, echoing all the old accusations but somehow cutting even deeper this time. He listed all the ways I had supposedly failed him, twisting my actions and intentions until I barely recognized myself in his version of events. I remember sitting there, feeling completely drained, as he went on and on, refusing to listen to anything I tried to say in my own defense. As I listened to him, something inside me shifted. It was as if a fog I hadn't even realized was there suddenly lifted, and I could see the situation for what it truly was. I realized, with a clarity I'd never felt before, that I couldn't keep living like this, constantly walking on eggshells, always trying to prove my love, always being made to feel like I was never enough. In that moment, I knew I had reached my limit. I couldn't take another day of his manipulation and accusations. Something inside me finally snapped, and I decided then and there that I needed to leave, no matter how difficult it might be. Making the decision to leave Daniel wasn't something that happened overnight. For months, maybe even years, I wrestled with the idea, torn between the hope that things might get better and the growing realization that I was losing myself in the relationship. Every time he apologized after an argument or promised to change, I wanted to believe him. But deep down, I knew that nothing was really changing, and that I was becoming more isolated and unhappy with each passing day. I spent countless nights lying awake, replaying our arguments in my mind and wondering if I was really the problem, just as he always said. I started confiding in a few close friends and family members, sharing pieces of what was happening behind closed doors. At first, I was afraid they wouldn't understand, or that they'd judge me for staying so long. But instead, they listened patiently and offered gentle support, reminding me that I deserved to feel safe and respected. My mom, in particular, became my anchor. She never pushed me, but she always let me know that I had a place to go if I ever needed it. Over time, their encouragement helped me see things more clearly. They helped me understand that leaving wasn't a sign of failure, but an act of courage and self-preservation. It still took months of building up my strength and planning in secret, but eventually, I knew I couldn't stay any longer. So, one day while Daniel was at work, I quietly packed my belongings, just the essentials, enough to start over. My hands were shaking as I wrote a short note explaining that I was leaving, unable to find the words to say everything I felt. I didn't make a scene or try to confront him. I simply walked out the door, got in my car, and drove 600 kilometers away to a new city, where my family was waiting to help me start fresh. For the first time in years, as I left that life behind, I felt a sense of relief and freedom that I hadn't known in a very long time. I was scared, but I was finally safe. A few weeks after I had finally left and begun to settle into my new life, I was still adjusting to the unfamiliar sense of peace and freedom. I was slowly unpacking boxes, getting used to my new surroundings, and trying to build a routine that didn't revolve around someone else's moods. One quiet afternoon, as I was checking my emails, I noticed a new message in my inbox. The subject line caught my eye. It was a confirmation for a PlayStation game purchase. At first, I was just puzzled. I stared at the email, reading it over and over, trying to figure out what it meant. I didn't own a PlayStation, and I had never bought any games for one. For a few seconds, I wondered if it was some kind of spam or a mistake. The details in the email, though, were oddly specific: my name, my email address, and a receipt for a game ID never even heard of. As I scrolled through the message, a sudden realization washed over me. Of course, Daniel. He must have used my email address to set up his PlayStation account, probably years ago, back when we were still together, and he insisted on sharing everything, even things I had no interest in. I felt a mix of annoyance and disbelief as it dawned on me that, even after everything, he was still using my information for his own benefit. I had no way of knowing how long Daniel had been using my email address for his PlayStation account. Maybe it had been months, or even years, with every purchase and every bit of personal information tied back to me without my knowledge. The thought made me feel both violated and strangely empowered, because now, finally, I had the chance to put a stop to it. As I scrolled to the bottom of the email, I noticed a small line in fine print that said something along the lines of, "If you didn't make this purchase, click here." My heart started pounding, a mix of nerves and excitement building inside me. Without a second thought, I clicked the link. The website opened up, asking me to confirm that I hadn't authorized the transaction. I followed the prompts, clicking through the security questions and confirming my identity. Within moments, a message appeared on the screen thanking me for reporting possible fraudulent activity. It explained that, for my protection, all activity associated with my PlayStation account would be immediately suspended and locked down until further notice. I sat back in my chair, a sense of satisfaction washing over me as I realized that, with just a couple of clicks, I had finally cut off one of the last lingering ties Daniel had to my life. By that point, I had already blocked Daniel on every possible platform, my phone, social media, email, so there was no way for him to contact me directly. I thought I had finally closed that chapter of my life for good. But it didn't take long for the consequences of my actions to catch up with me in an unexpected way. A few days after I reported the account, I received a long, angry message from Daniel's best friend. The tone was immediately hostile, and it was clear he was writing on Daniel's behalf. He launched into a tirade, explaining in painstaking detail just how much Daniel had lost because of what I'd done. According to him, every single game Daniel had ever purchased, apparently a substantial collection built up over years, was now completely inaccessible. All of Daniel's saved progress, achievements, and in-game purchases had been wiped out in an instant. The friend went on to say that Daniel was devastated, and that he would now have to go through a complicated process of verifying his identity with PlayStation just to create a new account and start over from scratch. The message didn't just stop at explaining the consequences for Daniel, it quickly devolved into a stream of personal attacks. His friend accused me of being heartless, saying that only someone truly cruel could do something so devastating on purpose. He called me selfish and vindictive, insisting that I must have planned this out just to hurt Daniel as much as possible. The words terrible, terrible human being were repeated several times, as if he wanted to make absolutely sure I understood just how low his opinion of me had sunk. As I read through the angry, emotional tirade, I felt a complicated swirl of feelings. There was a sense of relief, knowing that Daniel could no longer use my information or keep any connection to my life. At the same time, I was almost in disbelief at the intensity of the reaction. After everything I had endured, it was surreal to be painted as the villain for finally standing up for myself. And, if I'm completely honest, beneath all of that, there was a quiet, undeniable satisfaction. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I had reclaimed a small piece of power and control that had been taken from me, and that feeling was more comforting than any apology or explanation could ever be. It's been years since all of this happened, and my life has changed in ways I never could have imagined back then. After leaving Daniel, I spent a long time rebuilding myself, learning to trust again, to set boundaries, and to believe that I deserved kindness and respect. Therapy helped me untangle the knots of self-doubt and guilt that had built up over those years, and slowly, I started to rediscover the parts of myself that I'd lost. I reconnected with old friends and made new ones, surrounding myself with people who genuinely cared about me. My relationship with my family grew stronger than ever, they supported me through every step of my healing process. I went back to school, focused on my career, and even picked up hobbies I'd abandoned, like painting and hiking. For the first time in a long time, I felt free to make choices just for myself. As for Daniel, I never heard from him again after that message from his friend. Sometimes I wonder if he ever truly understood the impact of his actions, but I've learned that his growth, or lack of it, isn't my responsibility. What matters is that I moved on, and I'm happier and healthier than I ever was during those years with him. When I look back on everything I went through, I can't help but feel a deep sense of pride in how far I've come. That single, seemingly small act of reclaiming my power, locking Daniel out of the account and finally severing one of the last ties he had to my life, was really just the first step on a much longer journey. It was the spark that reminded me I was capable of standing up for myself, even after years of being made to feel powerless. Since then, I've worked hard to rebuild my life from the ground up. I've learned to set healthy boundaries and to recognize the warning signs of toxic behavior. I've surrounded myself with people who truly care about me and who respect me for who I am. I pursued my own interests and passions, and I've allowed myself to dream about the future again, something I couldn't do for a long time. Now, when I think about that moment of petty revenge, it's not just the satisfaction of that victory that makes me smile. It's the realization of how much my life has changed since then. I'm no longer defined by fear or self-doubt. Instead, my days are filled with a sense of freedom, self-respect, and genuine happiness. I know now that I deserve all of these things, and am grateful every day for the strength it took to walk away and start over. And so, that's my story, a journey from a place of quiet struggle to one of unexpected triumph. It's a reminder that sometimes, the smallest acts of defiance can spark the biggest changes. While the past can never be erased, the lessons learned and the strength gained have shaped me into the person I am today. I hope my experience offers a glimmer of hope to anyone who might be navigating their own difficult path, proving that even from the most challenging circumstances, it is possible to find your way back to yourself and build a life filled with peace and genuine joy.